Hello friends, James Stevenson and Loki back with another episode of Who's Hating Hard on Tesla Today? Who is today's hater? I regret to inform you that today's hater is British comedy legend. You know him as Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson. Let's check in with Loki, who is dozing away in bed. Before I share my desktop with you, I'm not going to scroll down this whole article published by The Guardian in their opinion section. Rightly so. This is an opinion submission from Rowan Atkinson that they published. They didn't do any fact checking, which you're about to see. They published what he sent as is. I'm not going to scroll down the whole article. I have taken screenshots that highlight his main points. I'm going to fly through that really fast. And then I'll show you the thorough and systematic debunking of his mistaken beliefs. I'm going to call them mistaken beliefs instead of FUD. I don't think this is Rowan Atkinson intentionally spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt about electric vehicles. I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. Stick to comedy, Rowan Atkinson. So here is the top of the page. I love electric vehicles and was an early adopter, but increasingly I feel duped. Ironically, you are duped, Rowan Atkinson, but not in the way you think. You have been duped into thinking electric vehicles aren't all that clean. And I've got some sources at the end that I'll show you, setting the record straight. So what's the subtitle here? Sadly, keeping your old petrol car may be better than buying an EV. There are sound environmental reasons not to jump just yet. And if this were the only point he made in the article, I wouldn't have as big a problem with it if he had just said, hey, some people drive so rarely that the carbon footprint of buying a new EV for them would be worse than just buying an old car that already has done most of its carbon footprint and then hardly ever driving it. That would be true if that were the only point he made in this article, but I've highlighted a bunch of other ones. We'll go through them real fast. So he says his university degree was in electrical and electronic engineering in the 1970s when there weren't any viable electric cars to buy. So I'm not sure how valid a point that is. Also, the artist rendering here by R. Fresson shows clearly a Tesla Model Y being driven off the Rainbow Bridge onto the scrap heap of history along with every other fossil fuel vehicle. That's kind of the point of this article, and it's kind of the reason I can say this is Who's Hating Hard on Tesla Today. Let me run the Who's Hating Hard on Tesla Today sizzle. Because they are pointing out Tesla in particular here, right? What other vehicle could this be than a Tesla Model 3 or a Tesla Model Y? All right, so let's move on down to the next point. The main point on this page was electric motoring doesn't seem to be quite the environmental panacea it claimed to be. All right, so why do you think that, Rowan Atkinson? Volvo released figures claiming that greenhouse gas emissions during production of an electric car are 70% higher than when manufacturing a petrol one. The problem lies with the lithium-ion batteries. Okay, well, this is the theory that if the carbon footprint at time of manufacturing is higher, call the game. It's over. The EV will never be cleaner because it started out costing more in terms of carbon footprint to manufacture. It'll never catch up, even though it'll never pollute, is the argument here. I'll let a professional FUD debunker tackle that one at the end of the video. The next point he goes to is, hey, there's alternatives and they're better. One of those is solid-state batteries. Those are better because they're lighter. They're worse because they don't exist. All right, next is hydrogen. He says Toyota has poured a lot of money into the development of hydrogen. Yeah, they have. And they have almost nothing to show for it except the dumb Toyota Mirai program from Southern California that I think they admitted failure on and closed down. Next is lithium-ion batteries are a complete non-starter for trucks because of its weight. At this point in the article, I had to go back and check the date to make sure this wasn't an article written 10 years ago. No, this article was published today, June 3rd, 2023. Crazy that he thinks that you should be using hydrogen combustion in a new kind of piston engine. Well, guess what, Sparky? You're still going to have emissions if you do that, and emissions contain pollutants. So that's not a sustainable solution as renewable energy is. So this person thinks hydrogen is going to win the race to power trucks, the same way Trevor Milton did. Let's keep going through these real fast. The biggest problem we need to address is society's relationship with the car, is the fast fashion sales culture, the idea that people are buying clothes and then discarding them after, a short, maybe you wear something once or twice and you dispose of it, right? That's the idea here. Rowan Atkinson somehow believes people are driving their cars for 3 years and then doing the same thing, junking them in the trash. Like driving them off the Rainbow Bridge onto the scrap heap. A 3-year-old car? I promise you somebody wants to buy that car and keep driving it from you. Next, if you really need a car, buy an old one and use it as little as possible. Okay, there are actually solutions where use cases in which I could get on board that that's a reasonable recommendation. We're talking people who drive very, very rarely. For those people, I mean, an even better solution than this would be to buy an old EV and use it as little as possible, right? I mean, the reality is that most people don't have the choice to drive very rarely. Most people have stuff they need to drive to all the time, and for them, an EV is going to make the most sense. Anybody putting a normal average number of miles on their car per year ought to be driving an EV because over its full life cycle, well to wheels, it will have a lower carbon footprint. The next thing he wants to do is develop synthetic fuel that would pollute less. Okay, well, great. You can pursue that course independently. That doesn't make a fossil fuel burning car on synthetic fuel a better option than a pure electric vehicle. He says our honeymoon with electric cars is coming to an end, so he thinks the EV adoption curve is going to stop and reverse. I disagree. And ends. Excuse me. I do all these videos as live stream format, so no editing for you. You get stuck if I have to stifle a sneeze listening to me do it. Electric propulsion will be of real global environmental benefit one day, but that day has yet to dawn. That's where Rowan Atkinson is at. So a bunch of the points that he made can be countered directly if you just go read the Tesla Secret Master Plan Part 3 white paper. I've got a link to it at the bottom here. Here's one of the charts from that presentation showing drive consumption and upstream losses, consumption in watt hours per mile. You can see a Toyota Corolla is going to have a much larger footprint over its life cycle than the Model 3 is. So I'm going to advance quickly to a different source because you're probably, unless you're a Tesla fan, you're probably saying, hey James, that's just Tesla trying to sell you more Teslas. You can't use them as a source. They have a conflict of interest on this question. That's why I was happy to see that this thread has already been debunked by Auke Hoekstra. I checked the comments and found published electric vehicle researcher at Eindhoven University of Technology had already debunked this thread for me. So let's dispense with my PowerPoint presentation and let's just run you through this live thread on Twitter. Thank you, Auke, for reminding me to say I also love Rowan Atkinson, the comedian, and think that's what he's best at doing. He's certainly a lot better at being a comedian than he is at recommending the cleanest transportation technologies available. I believe he learned electrical engineering once, probably in the 70s, I'm guessing. But I feel this erroneous article on EVs dupes the readers of The Guardian, and that's starting to become a pattern. Electric vehicles really emit 3 times less CO2. So, does the argument hold water that you should keep buying fossil fuel vehicles instead of EVs? No. If what you want is to have a lower carbon footprint, your electric vehicle will emit 3 times less CO2 over its full lifespan. So this is a very easy to read thread, so I'm just going to read through it. Auke starts by saying, I didn't do something similar in school once. I actually study this specific topic at TU Eindhoven. That's the Technology University Eindhoven. He is a director of research there and publishes scientific research papers about renewable transportation all the time. So he does actually dive into the facts. That's something that Rowan Atkinson said he was going to do in the article, but then he just regurgitated a lot of myths that have been debunked about electric vehicles. Debunking nonsense like this from people like Atkinson who think or pretend to know better sometimes feels like a full-time job. Please do look up all my studies and debunks in my pinned thread if you would like more in-depth info, but in essence, it's simple. EVs use around 4 times less energy, and that energy can come from electricity that is becoming increasingly low carbon. All right, so these are important points. I will say I did read Auke Hoekstra's pinned thread, and I recommend it. Go check it out. He is debunking misinformation about electric vehicles all the time. So there is no zero carbon solution. If you want transportation, you have no zero carbon options for doing so. I hate to break the news to you. If you want transportation, there will be a carbon footprint for it, right? So the criticism, hey, there's a carbon footprint to produce EVs, is insufficient. What you need to do next is compare that form of transportation against whatever alternative form of transportation you're recommending and see which of them has a larger total carbon footprint, right? Oh, and by the way, one of these, you can power yourself from solar panels on the roof of your house. Oh, by the way, one of these has no air pollution, no NO2 particle emissions, etc. I'm not entirely convinced Atkinson is being honest here because he is very precise in cherry-picking all the anti-EV tropes, including citing an extremely conservative outlier study that M. Liebrich and I picked apart when we did #AstonGate. On the other hand, he is complaining about the rare earths in the lithium battery. Well, you can put those in an electric engine, an electric motor, but they don't go in the battery, indicating he is not that well informed. You can also easily make electric motors without rare earths, by the way, as Tesla has announced they will do in their next generation electric motors. They'll contain no rare earths in the whole car. Maybe it's just that he wants to defend his love of combustion cars, because although he has an electric one, he has boatloads of really expensive combustion cars too, and it seems that is where his heart lies. Now, I don't have personal information on this, but I did see comments in reply to this article noting that Rowan Atkinson likes to drive his McLaren F1 around England. That's a fossil fuel burning car right there, and I'm not criticizing his choice. That was the fastest car in the world. Not that long ago, Elon Musk also bought one of those with the proceeds from the PayPal sale. And you can go find video of that if you want. There's also a pretty funny anecdote about Elon wrecking his McLaren F1 that he didn't have insured. Oh, goodness. He's complaining about current batteries and implying we have to wait for better ones, but the current ones will already last the lifetime of the car, and the car will emit 3 times less CO2 over its lifetime. Yes, I'm sure about this because that is my actual field of study. It is true that next gen batteries combined with a lighter drivetrain will actually make EVs lighter than combustion cars long before 2030, but Atkinson conveniently doesn't know or mention that. The good thing about electric vehicles is the grid gets cleaner all the time. So if you want to go with this long tailpipe theory that EVs are just as dirty because they're getting their power from coal burning power plants, well, there's fewer and fewer coal burning power plants every year than there were the year before. Uh, Fossil fuel burning cars will never get any cleaner, no matter how long they last. They'll always be as dirty or maybe a little dirtier as they age. Electric vehicles can get as clean as the energy source they're recharged from. And yeah, they're going to get lighter weight, they're going to get more cost effective, they're going to be more affordable for people to buy as the technology continues to improve and the production volume continues to scale. EVs will get better and become even better options than they already are. Instead, he fantasizes about hydrogen and e-fuels that are the future. Well, he might want that to be the future for reasons he doesn't want to share with us, but the problem is that you need 2 times more energy for hydrogen because it's so inefficient, and 5 times more energy for e-fuels. Apart from that, e-fuels require a heavy and maintenance-prone combustion engine that will make the car heavier in the future and still emit unhealthy particulates. And on top of this, you need 5 times more energy. Sounds like a genius business plan, Atkinson. No, e-fuels are not going to compete with electric vehicles because they're less efficient and they're heavier and they're polluting, right? None of that is better than buying an EV. And I have more news for him. The statement that batteries are way too heavy for trucks is about 10 years out of date. I have been one of the persons to explain this to the world, and my pinned thread also points to my keynote to the world's biggest EV conference on this last year. I watched this video, and I recommend watching this presentation. It's pretty short from Auke. And it features a Tesla Semi image as the future of electric trucking. But because it's more cost effective, right? The economic driver is what's going to force the transition. It's just way less expensive to recharge with electricity than it is to buy fossil fuels. And that'll become more true as governments cease to subsidize diesel fuel or start taxing it if it's got a tax exemption. This week, I will send in a paper. I hope it will be accepted by @Jewel_CP, where I show you should look at the TCO, the total cost of ownership per ton per kilometer, and using this metric, diesel trucks will become uncompetitive as soon as Tesla and others come out with long-range trucks. Tesla is already producing long-range electric trucks, and they have delivered maybe about 100 of them to Pepsi at this point, or between Tesla internal testing and Pepsi, they probably have about 100 being tested right now before they sell to additional customers, and that'll ramp up over the next year or two. Onwards, Atkinson dreams of hydrogen directly into combustion engines. Taking JBC diggers as an example, well, hydrogen could make sense for equipment that uses lots of power on some days, but little on average. But combustion is much less efficient than fuel cells. And then we get to the most curious move of all, complaining about fast fashion in cars because people get rid of their car after 3 years, or so he claims. Where does he think the cars go after that? Can't he remember the time he had to pay for secondhand cars? Yeah, the used market is going to value a 3-year-old car pretty highly. I mean, nowhere close to original sticker price, but Yeah, they don't go straight to the scrap heap after 3 years. That's not how it works in reality. Now, I don't blame Rowan Atkinson that much. He's an actor, comedian, and writer, and a darn good one, in my opinion. And the world is full of outspoken people with nonsensical opinions that they swear by. I mainly blame The Guardian. Shouldn't a serious newspaper scan their content for misinformation? They did publish it in the opinion section, so we got to give them partial credit for that. Maybe Elon Musk was right when he retweeted my debunk of a recent hit piece on EVs in The Guardian, claiming the paper had lost its way. That article overhyped the challenges with lithium and also got the amounts wrong by a factor of 1000x. Whew. You're publishing numbers that are 3 orders of magnitude off? That is not good, Guardian. It seems like The Guardian these days is all about blowing every negative aspect of climate solutions out of proportion while shielding readers from the calculations that show what works and what doesn't. Instead of making readers informed, they make them complacent. To summarize, Atkinson's a great comedian but doesn't understand the environmental impacts of EVs. The Guardian Quality Control should have picked this up. EVs emit 3 times less CO2 over their lifetime currently. EVs sold in 2050 will emit 10 times less. So they're going to get cleaner over time. And then he links to another debunking by somebody else here that you can go check out on your own time. I feel like the one point that didn't get made in this debunk that could have is at what point do EVs and internal combustion engine vehicles break even or have the same carbon footprint? And depending on the research, it's between, 16,000 miles and 25,000 miles, somewhere in there. And it depends on which kinds of vehicles you're comparing. Are they sedan form factor or truck or SUV form factor? And then you get a different number if you compare an EV versus a hybrid, but the EV is still the cleanest. And the EV always wins out in less than 3 years of average driving to have a smaller carbon footprint than either a fossil fuel vehicle or a hybrid. And that is my video for today. So a big shout out to Auke Hoekstra for doing this debunk for me, doing my show prep for me. Let's check back in with Loki and see that he is still napping in bed. I'll feed him breakfast shortly. And with that, I will outro and say, if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel over here, if that's where you're watching this video. If not, you must be watching it either on Twitter or on Patreon. Thank you to everyone who supports me on those sites, especially my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Rebellionaire.com, and I'll see you in the next one.